I am Sarnak, and I was once Warmaster of the Reach, and I am the one who wanted it. Let that be said first before anything else, because everything that followed is owed to men like me, and I will not hide inside the crowd of the guilty. I stood in the High Council and I beat the war drum with my own 2 hands. I told a hungry people they were owed a 10th crown. I am old now, and there is no one left to punish me for it but myself, and I have been thorough. I walk the Avenue of Triumphs most nights. It is the longest road in Drakkar, our throne city, a river of black stone that runs 3 leagues from the harbor of ships to the foot of the spear throne, and for 1,000 years it was the proudest road in the whole of the Reach. It is silent now. Grass has found the seams between the paving stones, and no one clears it, because to clear it would be to admit the road is still a road, and we have agreed among ourselves, without ever once saying it aloud, that it is not. It is only a place where a road used to be. You must understand what the Korrath were, or none of this will land the way it should. We were not raiders. We were not a swarm. We were an old and disciplined people, and we were conquerors in the fullest and coldest sense of that word, which is to say that we did not merely defeat our enemies, we collected them. When a Korrath fleet broke a rival power, we did not salt its worlds or scatter its people. We took its king. We brought that king home, alive, in chains of ceremonial iron, and we walked him down the Avenue of Triumphs while the whole of Drakkar lined the stone and watched. And at the end of that road, at the foot of the spear throne, the conquered sovereign knelt and gave up his crown, and that crown was hung upon the great iron tree behind the throne, the Viharn tree, where 9 crowns already hung. 9 crowns, 9 wars, 9 kings brought low. That was who we were. The 9 wars were not a boast to us, they were a genealogy. A Korrath child learned the 9 before he learned the names of his own grandfathers. The first crown taken from the Sithalan Sea Lords, the 3rd from the Emirach, who had ruled 40 worlds and thought themselves eternal, the 7th from the Dreed, whose king wept the whole length of the avenue and was despised for it, and whose weeping became a proverb we used to shame the weak. Every crown had its road story. Every king who walked that stone became, forever, a lesson in what happened to those who stood against the Reach. And so you will understand the thing that sat in the belly of every Korrath of my generation like a coal that would not go out. There were 9 crowns on the Viharn tree, and 9 is not 10. 9 is an unfinished number. It is a hand missing a finger. Our war priests taught that the spear god, Asek, had promised the Korrath 10 crowns and an ending, that when the 10th crown hung upon the iron tree, the Reach would be complete, and the god would look upon his people and be satisfied. For 3 generations we had hung no new crown. 3 generations of Korrath had grown old and died with 9 crowns on the tree and the 10th still owed, and each generation had passed the hunger down like an inheritance, and by the time it reached mine, the hunger was no longer a hope. It was a grievance. We felt cheated of our 10th war. We were a people who believed the universe was withholding something that was rightfully ours. I have thought a great deal, in the long nights on this dead road, about how a whole people can want a thing so badly that the wanting becomes the truth. We did not ask whether we were owed a 10th crown. We knew we were. And a people who knows a thing that badly will always, in the end, find a reason to reach for it. The reason we found was humanity. I want to be careful here because the temptation is to make them into something they never were to us. When we first heard of humans, we did not fear them. We barely noticed them. They were a small and quiet power out along the thin edge of the arm, on a scatter of worlds that no old empire had ever bothered to want. They did not send envoys to our court. They did not answer our heralds. When a Korrath survey fleet passed near their space, the humans did not challenge it and did not welcome it. They simply watched it pass and said nothing, and the fleet came home and reported that the humans had said nothing, and we took the silence for exactly what a conqueror always takes silence for. We took it for weakness. There were stories, of course. There are always stories. Old traders spoke of things they had heard from other old traders, that a fleet had once gone against the human worlds and had not come back, that there was a stretch of the star charts along the human edge that the cartographers left thin and unmarked, that the eldest of the elder species, the ones who had been old when the Korrath were young, would not go near the quiet worlds and would not say why. We heard these stories. I heard them. And I will tell you honestly what we did with them, because it is the heart of the whole matter. We laughed at them. We were the Korrath. We had taken 9 crowns. We had broken the Emirach who ruled 40 worlds. What was a rumor of a fleet that did not come home, against 9 crowns on an iron tree? A fleet does not come home for 1,000 reasons: bad charts, a dying star, a captain's pride. We knew fear when we saw it, and the caution of the old species we read as the timidity of the old, the way a young strong man reads his grandfather's carefulness as cowardice rather than as memory. The humans were quiet because they were weak. The old species avoided them because the old have grown soft. And here, along the thin edge of the arm, undefended and unwarlike and waiting, was a 10th crown that no one else had thought to reach for. I was the loudest voice for it. I will not soften that. I stood before the 9 spears. That was our war council, 9 marshals for the 9 wars, and I held the seat of the 3rd spear. And I told them the god's 10th crown was hanging out along the edge of the arm where any child could pluck it, and that if we did not take it, history would remember us as the generation of Korrath who stood beneath an unfinished tree and did nothing. I was good with words. That was my curse. A blunter man would have been argued down. I made the war sound like a duty. I made the hunger sound like honor. When I finished, the old marshal of the 1st spear, Kale Vhorn, who had walked the Dreed King down this very road when he was young, looked at me for a long time and said only, "The quiet ones have been quiet a long while, Sarnak. Long silence is not the same as no answer." And I, being clever, said that a silence 3 generations deep was the loudest confession of weakness a people could make. And the council laughed, and old Vhorn did not, and the council carried the vote, and old Vhorn's not laughing was outvoted, and that is how wars begin. Not with a monster in the council, with a clever man in a hungry room. We brought it to the king. Vorith Kor was our sovereign, Vorith of the long line of Kor, the spear king, the 10th of his name, and he believed, the man the god had made to hang the 10th crown. You must not imagine a fool on the throne. Vorith was not a fool. He was a hard, intelligent, disciplined sovereign, and he was, above all things, a man who had waited his whole life to be the one who completed the 9. He had grown up beneath the iron tree the same as the rest of us, counting the crowns, feeling the missing 10th like a missing tooth. When I laid the human worlds before him as the 10th crown, I watched something in his face that I have never forgotten, because I have seen it since in the mirror. It was not greed exactly. It was relief. Relief that the thing he had wanted his whole life was finally within his reach, that the universe was going to let him have it after all. He rose from the spear throne beneath the 9 crowns, and he said the words the war priests had waited 3 generations to hear a king say. He called the kindling. He named the 10th war. I cannot tell you the joy of it. I have to try, because if you do not understand the joy you will not understand the shame, and it is the shame this whole account is for. When the kindling was called, all of Drakkar went up like dry grass. The war bells rang from every spire. The young, Osek, the young, you have never seen a people so glad. Boys who had grown up hearing that the great days were behind us, that the 10th crown would never come, that they had been born too late for glory, those boys wept in the streets for happiness. The forges ran day and night. The avenue of triumphs was hung with blackened iron banners 3 leagues long, and the people walked it in the evenings just to feel the stone under their feet and imagine the day soon, when a 10th king would be walked down it in ceremonial chains. Mothers brought their sons to the harbor to see the fleet gather. The fleet, I will not tell you the number. It does not matter now, and it shames me to have known it. The fleet that gathered above Drakkar to take the 10th crown was the greatest the Korrath had ever raised. The Emirach had been broken by 1/3 of it. It filled the sky over the capital for 11 days as it assembled, so that for 11 days the city lay in a false iron dusk, and the people looked up at the shadow of their own strength and were glad. We wanted war. I want that word to sit there plain with nothing over it. We were not driven to it. We were not cornered. We were not defending our worlds or our young or our name. We wanted it. We had wanted it for 3 generations, and now we had a king bold enough to reach, and a Warmaster clever enough to make the reaching sound like honor, and a quiet enemy foolish enough, we thought, to be standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. We wanted the 10th crown, and the 10th crown was human, and so we went to take it gladly, singing, in the greatest fleet ever raised, and the whole of the Reach lined the harbor and cheered us out into the dark. That is the last part of this story I can tell you with any pride. Everything after is the other thing. The fleet went out. And here is where I must tell you the truth exactly as it came to us, in the exact order it came, because the order is the whole horror of it. When we sent a fleet to take a crown, we knew what to expect. We expected an answer. The Emirach had met us in the deep with 40 worlds worth of ships, and we had broken them over 3 years, and it had cost us dearly and gloriously. And we had brought home a crown and 30,000 of our dead as heroes. And that was war, and war we understood. War was an answer. You struck the enemy, and the enemy struck back, and out of the striking a crown was won, and a song was made. We went to the human edge expecting an answer. We were not given one. The fleet reached the thin worlds along the human arm, and there was nothing there to fight. The human worlds did not raise a wall of ships to meet us. They did not sortie. They did not send a herald to parley, nor a challenge to the field, nor a single shot into the dark. They did nothing. The fleet reported quiet worlds going about quiet lives, and it pressed inward, deeper toward the human heart, and still nothing rose to meet it. And I remember standing in the war hall in Drakkar reading these reports and feeling, for the first time, a cold thing that I did not have a name for. Because a people who will not fight you when you have come to take their king is not a weak people. A weak people fights and loses. Something else was happening, and I did not know what, and the not knowing was the first cold finger laid on the back of my neck. Then the reports stopped. They did not stop the way reports stop in war, in fire, in a last transmission, in a scream cut short, and a captain's voice reporting the enemy is upon us. That we could have understood, that we had a place for. The report stopped the way a conversation stops when the other party has simply set down the line and walked away. One by one, over 11 days, the same 11 days, someone noticed later that the fleet had taken to assemble. The ships of the greatest fleet the Korrath ever raised ceased to answer. Not destroyed, so far as we could tell, not calling for help, just no longer there. A ship would report all quiet, all well, and then at the next appointed hour it would not report, and it would never report again. And there would be no wreck and no fire and no signal, only a silence where a ship had been, as if the fleet were being unnumbered, one hull at a time, by something that did not think we were worth the courtesy of a battle. We had wanted war, and the humans, I understood at last, standing in that cold war hall, were not going to give us one. That is the thing no Korrath had ever imagined could be done to us. We had made war on 40 world empires and ancient sea lords and proud old powers, and every one of them in the end had done us the honor of fighting, even the ones who wept, even the ones we despised. They had raised their ships and met us in the deep and lost, and in the losing they had made us what we were. War requires two. It is the one thing a strong people cannot do alone. And the humans, without a word, without a herald, without a single shot that we ever recorded, had simply declined to be the second. They took our fleet apart the way a man clears grass from between paving stones, without anger, without ceremony, and without ever once looking up to acknowledge that the grass had wanted to be a road. I have had many years to understand what the silence meant, and I think it was this. To fight the Korrath was to make the Korrath. Every enemy who met us in the deep, even in losing, gave us our song, gave us our 10th crown dream, gave us the thing we hungered for. The humans understood, I do not know how, but they understood that the cruelest thing they could do to a people who wanted a war was to refuse them the war and take away the fleet anyway, to deny us the honor of the striking, to make our greatest armada not a defeated fleet, which is a glorious thing, but a lost one, which is only an embarrassment. They did not break our strength. They subtracted it. There is no song in being subtracted. And then they came to Drakkar. I will tell this part slowly, because I was there, and because it is the part the title of every story told about us since has fixed upon, and because it is the part I have spent 30 years trying to see clearly through the shame, which fogs a thing worse than any smoke. They did not come as a fleet. There was no armada in our sky to answer the armada we had sent. That would have been war again, and they had already refused us war. We never saw the ships that brought them, or if we saw them, we did not know them for what they were until it was long past mattering. What I remember is that Drakkar, the throne city, the heart of the Reach, the city that had sent out the greatest fleet ever raised and was waiting, still, for it to come home with a crown. Drakkar woke one gray morning to find that the humans were already inside it. Not attacking it, inside it, in the streets, in the low halls, along the Avenue of Triumphs. They were simply present the way a season is present, having arrived by no door anyone had thought to guard, because we had built our whole city and our whole war to face an enemy who would come at us, and they had not come at us. They had just come. Our guard turned out. I will not tell you there was no fighting, because that would be a lie, and I have told enough lies from a council floor to last a life. Our spears met them in the low city. But it was not a war, and it was not even a battle, and I will not dress it as one, because to describe it as a battle would be to give myself the dignity of an enemy who fought me, and I have lost the right to that dignity. Our spears met them, and our spears were not enough, and it was over in the low city in less time than it takes to tell, and the humans came up through Drakkar toward the spear throne the way water comes up through a hold hull, without hurry, without heat, filling every low place first and rising. I was in the throne hall when they reached it. I had that much duty left in me. I did not run, though I have wondered since whether staying was courage or only the numbness of a man watching the thing he built come true in the worst possible shape. King Korrath was on the spear throne. He had put on the war harness of the core line, the black iron of 10 Korraths, and he sat beneath the V-Harn tree with its 9 crowns and the empty 10th hook. And he did not flee, whatever else may be said of him, and I will grant him that to the end. He sat and he waited for the humans to come and make war on him, because even then, even with his city taken and his fleet subtracted, and his god's promise turned to ash, Korrath Kor still believed that at the last there would be a war, that the humans would come to his throne, and there would be a striking and a fury and a glorious end, and that a king who dies fighting under his own iron tree is a king the songs remember. They did not give him that either. The doors of the throne hall opened, and the humans came in, and I saw them at last close, and I will tell you the thing that undid me before anything else did. They were quiet, not the silence of discipline which we had, which is a held thing, a leash. Their quiet was not held. It was simply that they had nothing to say to us. They came into the heart of the Reach, beneath 9 crowns of 9 broken kings, before the 10th Korrath in his black iron. And they were not exalted, and they were not enraged, and they did not gloat, and they did not even seem to hate us. They looked at us the way a man looks at a job. There is no wound a proud people can suffer that is deeper than to be, at the end of everything, merely a task to the ones who have beaten you. I do not know which of them was first among them. That is a strange thing to have to write, and it is true. We are a people of rank. We read a room by its highest crest. I looked for the one who led them, and I could not find him or her or it. They did not announce a general. They did not present a sovereign to face our sovereign, king to king, the way the courtesy of 1,000 years demanded. They simply moved, and among them the movement had an order, and the order took them to the foot of the spear throne, and there they stopped and looked up at Korrath Kor, 10th of his name on the throne of the 10 Korraths, beneath the 9 crowns and the empty hook, and they did not kneel, and they did not challenge, and they did not speak. One of them spoke, finally. Only one, only once. I have turned the words over so many years that I no longer trust my memory of them exactly, and I will not pretend to a precision I have lost. But the shape of it was this. The human looked up at our king and said, without heat, almost gently, that they had heard the Korrath wanted a war, that the Korrath had wanted a war for 3 generations, and that the humans had discussed it. That was the word, discussed, as though our 10th crown, our God's promise, the great hunger of my whole people, had been an item on some quiet agenda somewhere, and that they had decided the Korrath would not have their war. Not this one. Not ever. And then the humans said the thing that I have carried like a stone in the gut for 30 years. The humans said, "You wanted to be remembered for a war. We are going to make sure you are remembered for something else." And then they took him. I want to be exact about what they did and did not do, because everything the galaxy has said about us since turns on it, and because the truth is worse than the exaggerations and I would rather be shamed by the truth. They did not kill Vorith Kor. That is the first thing. To kill a king on his throne under his tree is to make a martyr, and a martyr is only another kind of song, and they had come to take our songs away. They did not harm him, even not in the body. I saw him after, and there was no wound on him. They took him off the spear throne. They put no ceremonial iron on him, because ceremonial iron is honor, and the chains we had walked 9 kings in were a form of respect, the respect of a conqueror for the conquered's rank. They put no iron on our king at all. They took him by the harness, by the black war iron of 10 Voriths, the way you take a thing by whatever part of it is convenient, and they took him down off the throne of his fathers and out through the open doors, and I and the whole broken court of the Reach followed, because we could not follow, and they brought him out into the gray morning at the head of the Avenue of Triumphs. And they walked him down it. 3 leagues, the whole length of the Black Stone River from the foot of the spear throne to the harbor of ships, the road down which the Korrath had walked 9 conquered kings in 1,000 years of triumph. They walked our king down it, and Drakkar came out to watch. It could not help itself. The whole of the throne city, which had lined this stone to cheer the fleet out only weeks before, which had wept for joy at the kindling, which had raised its sons to dream of the day, a 10th king would be walked down this road in chains. The whole of Drakkar came out onto the Avenue of Triumphs and watched its own king walk down it instead. And the humans did not hurry, and they did not slow. They set a pace that was neither cruel nor kind, an ordinary walking pace, the pace of people going about a thing that must be done, and they took Vorith Kor the length of his own triumph road at that ordinary pace, past his own people in silence, hour after hour, so that there was nothing to do but watch and go on watching and understand. That is the thing about it that I did not grasp until much later, thinking on it here on the empty stone. They could have killed him in the throne hall in an instant, and it would have been mercy compared to what they chose. They did not choose a spectacle of cruelty. There was no torment, no blood, no display. They chose the opposite of a spectacle. They chose duration. They chose the slow, plain, unhurried public unmaking of a sovereign in front of the people who had made him their sovereign, and they made us watch every step of it, and the very ordinariness of the pace was the whole cruelty, because it said, more clearly than any torment could have, that this was not vengeance. Vengeance would have been passion, and passion is a kind of respect. This was procedure. We had wanted to be their great enemy, their 10th war, the striking that made a song. And they walked our king down our road at a walking pace to teach us, and everyone watching, that we had not even risen to the level of an enemy. We had risen to the level of a task that had to be seen through to the end. I watched Vorith Kor walk his own triumph road. I watched the face of the Spear King, the 10th of his name, the man who was to complete the 9, as he was walked past the spot where the Dreed King had wept and been despised, the very lesson we used to shame the weak. And I watched him not weep, because he had spent his whole life learning not to be the Dreed King, and I watched the not weeping cost him more than weeping ever cost that other, older man. And at the foot of the harbor, where the road ends and the water begins, at the place where 9 conquered kings had knelt and given up their crowns to be hung on the iron tree, there the humans stopped. And they did not make Vorith kneel. They did not take a crown from him, because to take his crown would have been to hang a 10th crown on the tree, and a 10th crown, even a shameful one, is still a completion, still the finished number, still the thing the god had promised. They understood the tree. Asek helped me. They understood our whole religion better in an afternoon than the war priests had understood it in 3 generations, and they left the 10th hook empty on purpose, and they did not take his crown, and they did not make him kneel, and they simply stopped, and turned, and left him standing there at the end of the road, uncrowned and unkilled and unmade, a king with no war in front of his whole silent city. And then the humans went. That is the part that the stories always get wrong, and it is the part that matters most. They did not stay. They did not put a governor over us. They did not garrison Drakkar or take the throne city for their own or demand tribute or set their flag on the spear throne. They did not want the reach. They had never wanted the reach. They took nothing from us, no world, no crown, no life, not even the king's life. They came because we had insisted on coming to them, and they answered the insistence in a single gray morning, and then their task seen through, they left, as quietly and completely as they had arrived, and we never saw them again. They left us our king, alive and whole and finished. They left us our 9 crowns and our empty 10th hook. They left us our city untouched, undamaged, every stone of it in place. They took nothing at all. They took nothing at all, and they unmade us more completely than the Emirach had been unmade by 3 years of war and 30,000 of our dead. That is the HFY of it, if you want the plain shape of the thing, the shape the galaxy fixed on. They proved that the deepest defeat a proud people can be handed is not destruction, which is a kind of honor, but the flat refusal of the war they came for, and the patient public unmaking of everything they thought that war was going to make them. Voreth Kor lived 11 years after the road. He never spoke of it. He never sat the spear throne again, could not. The throne meant the tree, and the tree meant the 10th crown, and the 10th crown was the thing that had been proven that gray morning to be a lie the god had told us or we had told ourselves. He gave no more orders. He raised no more fleets. There was nothing left in him to raise them with. When he died quietly in an ordinary room, we did not walk him anywhere. We had learned by then what the avenue of triumphs was for, and it was not for us. It was the reach itself that abolished the rest. Not the humans, they were long gone and cared nothing for what we did after. It was we who struck it all down, in the years that followed, out of a shame so total that it reorganized a whole civilization the way grief reorganizes a house. We took down the 9 crowns from the Viharn tree. We did not destroy them, that would have been a passion, and we had learned to distrust our passions. We only took them down and gave them, quietly, back to the 9 broken peoples we had taken them from, those that still remained, and we asked nothing in return and made no ceremony of it. We cut down the iron tree. We abolished the kindling and the war rites and the whole worship of Asek, not by decree but by the slower and more permanent method of simply, as a people, ceasing to believe in it, the way you cease to believe in a story you have finally seen from the outside. The war priests put off their iron. The 9 spears were dissolved, and I, the last living marshal of that council, the 3rd spear, the loudest voice for the 10th crown, was left with nothing to be Warmaster of, which is the correct amount, and I have not once complained of it. And we struck Voreth's name. That was the hardest and the last of it, and it was not done in anger. We loved him, in the way a people loves the king who embodies their worst hope. But a people cannot hold both the memory of what it wanted to be and the memory of what it was made to be, and so, quietly, without a decree, the name Voreth Kor passed out of our speaking. Not cursed, not condemned, only set down. A king remembered, for a war is a king with a name. A king walked down his own triumph road at a walking pace is a lesson, and a lesson does not need a name. It needs only to be remembered, and the not naming is part of the remembering. There have been no more Voreths. The line of Kor, which had ruled the Reach for 1,000 years, chose to end itself rather than pretend the throne still meant what it had meant, and there is no sovereign in Drakkar now, and there has not been for 30 years, and there will not be again. We govern ourselves now the way a man governs himself after he has been shamed into knowing exactly what he is capable of, carefully, quietly, without any road to walk anyone down. I have wondered on the long nights why the humans bothered. It would have cost them less to destroy us, and less still to ignore us, to simply keep subtracting our fleets in the dark until we gave up the coming. Why the road? Why walk our king 3 leagues at a walking pace through his own weeping city, when a single gray morning's work had already ended us? And I think the answer is the coldest and most human thing of all, and it is the reason the galaxy has never forgotten it, and it is the reason I set it down here for whoever finds it. They did not do it for us. The Korrath were finished the moment the fleet went silent in the dark. The road added nothing to our defeat. They did the road for everyone else. For the old species who had already learned to avoid the quiet worlds and had never been told why. For the powers who might one day, 3 generations on, look at the quiet human edge and mistake its silence for weakness the way we did, and feel the same hunger and reach. The humans took our king the long way down our own triumph road in front of our whole city, so that the story of it would be too shameful and too strange to die. So that it would be told, and told wrong, and told again, growing in the telling, until it became exactly the thing it has become. A warning that lives in every star atlas as a blank place. A thing the eldest species will not go near and will not explain. A silence that says, to any people who ever again grow hungry for a 10th crown, that the humans will not give you the war you want, and will not let you die the death you want, and will instead walk your king down your own proudest road at an ordinary pace and leave you alive to remember it. We wanted a war. That is the whole of it, and I have not tried to make it anything else. We were not driven or cornered or wronged. We were proud and old and hungry, and we wanted our 10th crown, and we went gladly to take it, singing in the greatest fleet ever raised, and the quiet ones on the edge of the arm heard us coming and declined. And then they came and took nothing and left us whole and unmade us forever. I am Sarnak. I was Warmaster of the Reach, and I am the one who wanted it, and I walk the avenue of triumphs most nights so that there is at least one of us who does not let the grass have it uncontested, one of us who still walks its length on purpose, at a walking pace, the way they did, so that I do not forget the pace because the pace was the whole of it. The city is quiet around me. The tree is gone and the throne is empty and the name is set down. The road runs 3 leagues from the harbor to nothing, and no one will ever be walked down it again, in triumph or in shame, because we have no more kings to walk and no more crowns to want and no more songs left in us to be made. That is the 10th crown the god promised us. That is the ending. It hangs, unhung, on an empty hook, in a hall no one enters, in a city that will never march again.